Looks like we're live. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Mission Top for one of our Friday streams that features not just myself, Gary, but also my wife, Sara. And Mission Top is a place, it is a place of philosophia where we are endeavoring to cultivate that friendship love with wisdom. But it's also a farmstead and ranch, and it's a family. It's a place of trying to apply ideas and principles to lived out experience. And that's why I like these Friday streams, is because they allow us to show the deep application of the principles that so often I'm trying to talk about on here, or I try to hit in video essays. You know, at the end of the day, they actually have to be applied into the world. It's very much, the union of heaven and earth, masculine and feminine. So, of course, I most of the time am playing out more of that masculine role on here, trying to kind of divine those heavenly principles. But again, they're not much of use unless they can actually be put out into application in the world. And of course, that's that realm of lived experience and lived domain is more Sara's domain. and so it's great to have her on here to kind of get things back to reality, right? Take things out of the clouds and see what things are like in an actual lived experience on here. And so with that, let's dive into today's topic that we have. Well, actually not with that. What I always like to do to leave it out to just kind of get a recap of the week is to ask Sara what has been going on the farmstead this week.
So we've had several new lambs born. We had two sets of triplets.
I'm going to adjust the camera. It looks like we're getting blown out a little bit.
So it looks like I'm glowing. And our chicks are all doing well. And we actually have 15 new chicks. I'm really excited about them because they're all hens that are all going to be they were gifts sent to us by one of Gary's old business partners. And they're all going to be like super, super cool. So that'll be kind of a fun thing. Sometimes we get really practical here, so it's fun to have a little bit of that kind of extra fun thing to look forward to. And can you think of anything else big?
Yeah, so you mentioned the lambs, right?
Yeah, the lambs are huge. They're so cute and fun.
There's a lot of forage now around finally, where we went all winter. We're having to feed, a lot of hay to the animals, and now things have really grown in nice, such that every day we're moving our sheep and our goats in a rotational grazing pattern, and every day they have just a delicious salad, spring salad mix to eat, as well as leaves on the shrubs and whatnot. So that is fun to see. Like, there's something very therapeutic actually about going out and just watching grazing animals graze.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, would you agree with that?
Yeah, no, I would definitely agree.
Yeah, I can sit there oftentimes for like 10 minutes, 20 minutes just watching them graze, and there's something about it
it's mesmerizing. That's what it is.
It's mesmerizing, it's peaceful. You throw in lambs to the mix, and then also, our new livestock guardian dogs have been just kind of falling nicely into their role. They now stay out 24 hours a day with the sheep and the goats and live there. They're still kind of puppies, but at the same time, they've started their guarding role. They're barking at things all night. We kind of leave the windows open and we can hear them all night doing their job, and it's not an annoyance at all because
we're like happy about it.
Yeah, we're like, good job.
Yes, it's working.
Yeah, good job, Leon.
Especially because our huskies don't really do that. So
right.
It's like, wow, they really like naturally just want to do that. They just want to protect and alert. So it's cool.
The other thing that's been going on is that we are now, I think, 100% ready, once I sharpen a knife, to harvest or slaughter our first animals. And I was hoping to do it this week.
Yeah.
Because we're going to do a lamb first. I was hoping to do it this week, but with other things, trying to do the interstellar video essay that I've been working on, we've been prioritizing that. So I think Monday will be the day that we do this for the first time. I just got a chain hoist that I needed in the mail today. I have to sharpen up the knife because it needs to be, that's one of the kind of keys to doing the whole process well from beginning to end, is to have a superbly sharp knife. And we've got that. We've got a gambrel to hang it on. We've got everything ready to go. And I've tried to be ready with the knowledge. We've already skinned and eviscerated one sheep in the past, but here we go. This is going to be for the real deal.
We
to
didn't
put
eat
food.
the other one, and that's going to be the part that I'm like, can we do that?
Yep.
Some of the lambs will for sure not be able to at first, just because we have such a close relationship with them.
Yeah, and that's the problem of these first lambs. Of course, the kids have named all of them, and so we have to eat a named lamb, and
it's so sad.
But that gets to like that's how it should be in a sense. Not that everybody has to name their animals, and I'm sure we won't in the future.
I don't know about that.
Right, but as far as having a personal relationship with your animals, as far as having to face up to what eating meat entails, this is what we wanted, to have to face up to this process and whatnot. So
yeah, it definitely gets you thinking all the time about like, wow, like how does this all work, and why is it that we love these and then we're gonna eat them? Like, I don't know, but it's good. We've had a lot of good conversations about it.
And 1 week after that will probably be the first pig. So stay tuned, and we'll give you the updates as those things happen. Thanks for being on there, Christian. Always
Catherine,
glad to have you. And
my
Catherine,
sister.
Yep, Sarah's sister. So thanks for being on there. And anybody that comes on here, you're welcome to participate, ask questions. That's the kind of the beauty of doing a live stream.
Right.
So, but with that, let's finally get into the topic, which is related to harvesting and slaughter, but only tangentially. So we are talking today about making a family meal a sacred space and a sacred time. And a good, if you want to go more into sacred space and sacred time, we were talking about that on the Monday stream and went more detail into that. So we'll just kind of review that briefly. What the concept of sacred space and sacred time is fairly self-explanatory, but it's a little more technical than that. But the basic notion of it is that there are times and places in our lives that are set apart as different in a way that are more filled with meaning and sacredness. And so an easy example is that there are objects like that in the world, maybe something special that somebody gave you or comes from a special place. That is not just any other chair or something or cup. If it was a special chair, it was given to you from a loved one or has some meaning, that thing is a sacred object now. It is apart from all others. The Elvis's guitar, even though it might be just a Fender Stratocaster or something like that, of which there are thousands, is not just another Fender Stratocaster. It is more meaningful than all the other ones, even though the atoms and the molecules are virtually the same, the same kind of thing. And so that's what sacred space is like, is that they're the spaces around us in life, and hopefully you all have some, that are different and set apart from all the other mundane spaces of the world. So this could be anything from a church, which obviously is intending to be that kind of sacred space, to a sports arena, to a place in nature. What are some of your sacred spaces that you have, Sarah?
Things that are like tied up with my childhood home, or vacation spots that we went to, habitually or ritualistically maybe. Like we go to certain places every year, and those are sacred spaces for sure. So, other places with our family and our home, places that we've lived or had big life-changing experiences in, like certain houses that we've gone back to be like, we used to live there and this is what happened when we lived there. Those are all different than the other houses that we drive by. So.
So those are very good examples of sacred space, and sacred time works in the same way. There are times and things that go on that are not just the same as any other thing passing through time. They have more significance. So, sacred rituals are kind of the quintessential example, but it can be anything else. It can be, the time where you're there, the time, leading up to Christmas is probably in the American mind kind of one of the most potent times that is different than all other times, especially for children. And everybody has experienced those kinds of things. There's oftentimes sacred times bound up with anticipation of events, and also kind of even sacred times bound up with coming out after events as well. So anyway, yes, that's sacred space and sacred time, and it's bound up with this notion of re-enchanting the world, which I like to talk about. I think it's kind of a good image for what we are aiming at with this channel and in our own lives, is to, in essence, fill more our time, and the time that we pass through and the spaces around us with more sacredness. Okay, so so one way of understanding the notion of enchanting the world is to say, how can I make more of the time sacred and more of the space sacred in my world? Because if it's sacred, it's full of meaning, right? And so if you want your life more filled with meaning and fulfillment, you can try to understand these concepts, sacred space and sacred time, and have it be more prevalent around you in your life. Anything else you want to say about that?
You said it well.
Okay. So, all right, let's look at this thumbnail painting real quick. And LSJT, I've seen your comments, and so we'll pick a good time to address those. They're good points. And so we'll get into that. But let's pull up real quick this thumbnail that I used today. I've had it in the corner, but I think it's just a good example to kind of get us what a sacred space and time might look like. What strikes you about this image, Sarah?
The movement going on, all of the different things that are happening. It's not just like peaceful and perfect like you would be like if you were doing a communion or something like that. It's raw, but it looks happy. The colors are warm. Mm-hmm. I like the dad in the corner kind of watching over. I like that the animals are involved because that's very much something that happens at our mealtimes. We can relate to that better than we could have a year ago.
Yeah.
And I like also that it brings in this older person who's probably like a grandmother, bringing it into the table as well, because that's important, whether she was the person who instituted or started meals or helped meals happen all those years, maybe for her daughter. And also probably the wisdom that she brings. She looks kind of thoughtful as she's preparing some food there or something.
Yeah, I think all those are good things. That's what I like about it too, especially the element of kind of the beauty of it. I mean, mm-hmm. It's beautiful and there is a sacredness to it, but it's also at the same time not a perfection. There is a certain chaos to the image in the way that you've got kind of all levels of life there, from something that feels like a ritual that's sacred. There's been there's instruments out there in a setting, right? But at the same time there's kind of the chaos of life. There's even the animal kind of level of life in there, whether it's in the food or participating. So that's what I want to get to with the nature of a sacred of a meal being a sacred time and a sacred place is not some notion of perfection, that there's actually something in kind of the union of order and chaos in a meal, both kind of meaning and possibility that comes together in the right setting to make something beautiful, right? And that's kind of like that the notion of nature, let's say like a cabin in the woods. There's something kind of ordered about the cabin, but there's something beautiful about the natural setting of everything, and you combine the two, and that's where you get kind of the most beautiful kind of experience or sacred experience with it, I guess you could say.
Absolutely.
And so that brings us to the dinner table. The dinner table in your house can either be a sacred or a profane space, right? Something that is just a means to put calories and protein and whatnot into bodies so that they don't die, or it can be something bound up, with sacredness, with meaning, etc. And we spend our son Robbie has done a little talk at our church that do you remember how much of our lives is
I can't remember. I should pull that out before it came. But I mean, so much of our lives is bound up in a family meal.
Yeah, we're talking years and years of our lives are spent at these tables.
And even more is done thinking about it, because you're always having to plan and prepare and make sure it happens. That means grocery shopping and meal planning and all that kind of stuff.
Exactly,
so
yes.
It's a big part of my life.
Yeah, so much time is bound up in it. So why have it be something that's just meaningless? Why have it be something that could even be a negative experience?
No, definitely. And I think a lot of times, like sometimes when I just get into just kind of going through the process, just getting it done, it really becomes miserable. But it's good to take a step back and think, okay, why are we doing this? Why does it really matter? And how can I make this the best use of my time? So things like that really motivate me to make better meal plans and spend a little bit more time and kind of find the joy in it than just kind of making it happen.
Yeah.
So.
They can either be things that we suffer through. Some people treat food as if it's just something to kind of get through.
Well, yeah, because everyone eats.
Right, exactly.
So
it must be done.
It has to be done in some way or another.
And some people, get and don't even enjoy it. Food is one of the few like inherently enjoyable things in life, and a lot of people, don't even take the work to make it something enjoyable in their lives. Obviously, you can go too far with that. Food can become your god.
Oh, definitely.
In a lot of ways. But at the same time, it can be just something beautiful and enjoyable. So if you take how, a family meal could be something utterly profane and unenjoyable, with kids crying and burnt food and resentful people, all together. Or it could be something, again, beautiful and sacred. Why not choose the beautiful and sacred? And so the first principle I want to bring out here is the notion that as you try to make a meal beautiful and sacred, everything potentially matters in doing that. So, Sarah, what are some of the things that you latch onto as being some of the most important parts of what makes a meal a sacred space or time?
Sorry, I have to back up and preface a little bit, because I know you always do this, but I don't want anyone to get the impression that we somehow have found this secret to having peaceful, beautiful family meals that look like that picture. As a matter of fact, so much of the time is that chaos and craziness, and I burn plenty of things, or the kids do when they're helping, but it's all making space for those times that it does actually come together and actually happen. Yeah. That it's all worth it. And having that perspective that it's not always going to be perfect, and we certainly don't do it perfectly, and it's evolved and it's changed how it's looked through the years for us. Mostly been the same for the most part, but
yeah,
we're certainly, I know that you're not thinking that, but I just feel sometimes feel stupid coming on here talking about things because I don't have it all figured out.
Yeah,
and these are just some ideas. I know you always are going to say that, but I can't talk until I say that because.
Well, I was definitely going to plan on getting to that point. And I think probably is appropriate that we lead it out with it first. Is that this notion of a sacred space and sacred time, it's always aspirational, and most important is that you even try. Because trying gets you closer, and it literally might take thousands and thousands of iterations to even get something that feels enchanted, right? Because first of all, in our life, we didn't even have these notions at first, and you just kind of have meals. Although we had a good basis from our families and things like that. Yeah. But then you start realizing, this could be better. Everything about this thing could be more meaningful. The very materials of the table itself, why have a plastic table? That is not nearly as meaningful or enchanting as a wood table, for instance. And it's the place settings and it's everything. So little by little, you can't do it all at once. You start working on each of these elements and get them better, and it may take, especially when it comes to the behavior part of things and kids, it may take thousands of iterations, right?
Oh, definitely, and we've done that so much.
So. But if you get it moving even more towards the enchanted, such that you've kind of crossed the threshold of something that is now inherently enjoyable, and then you're just building on that, then it's already this positive force in your life that kind of, in a cyclical way, even as much as you have to do it every day, is deepening and deepening your life as you do it. Right?
Yeah, and we already kind of said this, but this is passed on a bit from our families. Is a tradition that was already going on. We already knew it was important. Mm-hmm. So
but you could say what aspects did your family pass on? Because I think there's kind of different things that they passed on to us.
Yeah, that having a family meal is so important for more than just the food. But it is important as well for the nutrition, because you're going to eat better when you're there with your family. And as a mom, you're going to put on something better than just throw some things in your mouth or just feed this kid that or that kid that, But then also that it is a time, in our home, we always said a prayer. That was the time that we gathered for prayer. So that was a huge thing for us.
Yeah, you tie it up with other ritual and just that nature of the prayer. Think how that's so ubiquitous across cultures. Even secular people a lot of times will have some sort of ritual like that.
Oh, definitely.
Because, there is something that everyone realizes, there is something inherently sacred or special about doing the meal like this, right?
Mm-hmm. And then, like, it was really nice for me to have a mom that taught me little things. Like, she'd say, you know, you should kind of have something in mind by 11 o'clock in the morning, what you're going to make for dinner that night. And it's not like it has to be that, but, you know, little things like that help me realize this is going to take some time.
Yep.
And then I would go grocery shopping with my mom, and we would fill up the cart huge because we'd try to go just on Saturdays, go down to Food for Less, fill up our cart. And I knew that my mom had a plan. Like, it wasn't just like, okay, what are we going to do? It was like we kind of had set meals that we'd have a lot over and over and over again. And so it just taught me that this takes some preparation and some time for anything good to happen.
Okay. Yeah, so those are all good things that were passed on that already gave us a good starting point. I'd say the one that, you know, my family specializes in, just because we lived a lot of different places, and, like, you know, even back in the I guess it would have been 70s when my parents met. Like, they already cared about food. My dad loved sushi,
the Nuilas
even back in the 70s. And so for you know, my family, probably what specializes in is kind of the quality of the food, as far as being, you know, enjoyable. Sarah's family, you know, it's not that they didn't have that, but, you know, like, there was maybe even a greater focus on, like she said, the nutrition, you know, the inherent nutritional goodness of the food. And that's not just a scientific concept, that is a concept of meaning, but my family had something of more of kind of the cultural beauty of it, or just kind of the inherent quality of the food in terms of taste and smell and presentation.
I also came from a family mostly girls too, and that probably shaped what we ate a lot.
Yeah, because of course they're always, you know, growing up in the 90s. This is mostly in the 90s and stuff. She's grown up. Of course, there's this, you know, always the thoughts about figure.
And then when I got married, and then I started going to family dinners with Gary's family a lot, and it was always this, like, rich, delicious, yummy food. I had to learn how to deal with that.
Yeah. So you can see, as you know, we've tried to combine all those things in our families. That's where we started at, but that was just the starting point. There's so much more than that, because in the end, everything, again, matters. Like, what are some of the things that we haven't mentioned yet that also matter as to making a meal sacred or meaningful or enchanting?
I mean, there's a lot of different things I could say with that. There's little things like making sure, this is something I'm not great at doing, but I always am trying to make sure that the space is kind of clean, or the house just isn't in total shambles when it's time to sit down to a meal. That sort of sets a nice stage. Putting little, I don't know if you're looking for this, but, like, making little efforts to make sure the kids realize this isn't just like snack time or something. So maybe putting a flower at the table if we happen to have one in the yard, sending a kid out to pick one.
Ornamentation.
Or lighting a candle if it's winter time is always really special.
And again, that's where, like, the very place settings themselves matter. And you could think, well, this all sounds expensive now. But if you think about it, like, think how, you know, in a lot of ways, a poor person 200 years ago, the nature of the place settings they might have had, just made out of basic metals or wood or things like that, are oftentimes more beautiful than the thing, you know, than your kids, you know, SpongeBob SquarePants plastic dish that you're serving them up on now, right? Which is inherently ugly, you know? You just have to say, the things we put out there that we just kind of take that our kids supposedly want, you know, again, the plastic stuff, the thing, you know, it's, if you just look at it with fresh eyes, you're like, yeah, look at these ugly things I've got here, where it could be beautiful things that we put out, things that have, you know, materials. It's funny because materials in and of themselves have kind of inherent experiences of meaning tied up with them. Plastic being way less, you know, meaningful than wood or metal or you know, ceramic or things like that are more tied into the earth. And natural things than kind of more synthetic things. Another
thing we have to do is, like, make sure little details are taken care of. Like, the forks all need to be at the table for sure. I mean, we set the table. Somebody's in charge of setting the table. But also making sure water's at the table. Like, the more we can make sure everyone gets to the table and stays at the table, the better chances we will have of having a greater conversation or having the time be meaningful. Like, make sure the dogs are fed, make sure things like that are done. Because especially with a family of 10 people, there are so many reasons to get up and down and up and down. And then sometimes after a meal, we were just like playing Jack in the Box and Ring Around the Rosies the whole time.
Yeah.
So.
and here's a good point to interject. Like, with all this, obviously you can go overboard. There's always a sense in which any virtue taken to an extreme becomes a vice. So if you try to start making things as rigid requirements, or it must be this way or that way, then obviously, you know, you know inherently that very quickly that family meal could become something where everybody is just uptight and afraid they're going to break the sacred thing that's in front of them or whatnot. So of course there's always this balance in there between too much order in it and also too much chaos, because you kind of want, again, some of that chaos and looseness, but then you need your kids to stay at the table, not be, a lot of kids will literally take one bite of something and then they're off and things. And so, yeah, there's always this interplay.
We've had to institute things to help kids stay at the table as well that are more like, no, you have to stay at the table. But encouraging kids to stay at the table by having everything ready there and nice is the better way to do it, of course.
Yeah. Okay.
I got to close this door. It keeps opening.
Oh, yeah, and creaking. So one thing I'll mention that's a good guidance as far as the aesthetic of what a more enchanted space would look like, that I always use kind of rules of thumb, and I've probably mentioned them before, but just imagine, would this thing belong in Harry Potter or in Hogwarts, or would it belong in Lord of the Rings, or would it belong in your favorite kind of magical enchanted world? There's a reason those worlds feel enchanted, and the reason why there's a meticulous effort paid to the details of those worlds, the place settings, the nature of the materials used and everything. And it's because, like we said, certain things have more sacredness and enchantment to them. So that's a good just rule of thumb to ask with it. And again, there's not you can't make that into a law, but it's a principle that you can do.
Yeah.
But, as Sarah's already been putting in there, things as to behavior matter just as much as the physical things when it comes to making this space sacred. So even the preparation of the food, just the thought that goes into it, if the food is prepared resentfully.
Well, and this falls on me, because if I am rushed getting something and kind of thinking in my head, I wish everyone was helping me more, it totally shows up at the table.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if we're making
in the very taste of
dinner.
the food,
no,
right?
It's very true.
There is something to, the notion of, this food was made with love and therefore it's better. There is something about that,
No,
right?
it's for sure. And sometimes I have to stop and take a deep breath and be like, hey, this is not sometimes I get really stressed out with timing and things like that, but sometimes you have to get perspective and be like, okay, we're making a meal to have sit down and be together. That's what's most important. So stop rushing and just take some time to make this nicer. So.
All right. And again, thank you for all that's going on in the chat. I see you guys are having a good discussion. And just so, it seems like some of the discussion is going on around veganism. And I think we're going to address that more at the end, just to kind of keep things on the topic. I mean, it's a good thing to discuss. But one thing is Sarah does have to kind of leave at a certain time today. So we're going to make sure to get through the main things, the main content as far as the topic, and then we'll definitely hit that back. So don't think that we're not ignoring it. All right. So one other thing I wanted to get into is with your kids, from the very beginning, you can help them to realize that this isn't just a trivial matter, that this is a sacred ritual. That's how you should see this. It is a ritual, and it bears all the marks of what rituals are, across humanity. And we'll get into that in just a sec. But if you just kind of introduce that concept, your kids immediately start sensing, oh, this isn't just, play or something that's trivial. This is something that matters, right?
Well, some of the ways we do that is by expecting everyone to be there.
Yeah.
And sometimes
exactly. Not making it that, you can just not be there whenever you want. It's got to be a good reason.
But we try to be flexible. If they have a reasonable thing, we try to do meals around that. So it shows them hey, we're willing to work with you, but we really want you there. So we're willing to have breakfast or dinner or whatever at this time because we want you there. Within reason, there's always going to be times that people can't come.
And it's so important that, oftentimes we've changed the times of doing things to maximize the amount of people there and whatnot, because we see it as that important.
Definitely.
So let's think a little bit, deeper about why, or about the nature of this, the strangeness in some ways of the way that we do this ritual of a meal together in humanity. Because, consider for a minute that a lot of animals, it's the lesser kind of animals that kind of share food or eat together, if you will. A lot of animals are trying to get away from the other animals as they eat it. They're not looking to come and enjoy it together. Even if they eat it together, they're all just trying to get as much as they can get, right? Our pigs are like that. And even though a flock of ruminants are kind of in the same area all eating next to each other, and I'm sure they feel in as much as a flock or a herd is almost one bigger organism, I'm sure they feel kind of a togetherness in the way that they're eating together. But at the same time, they're off kind of all doing their own thing as far as they're eating. It's not like let's kind of eat this same plant together and talk about it and enjoy it together, right? It's not the same thing. Right. But humans do, on the other hand. We prepare the same thing, and then we expect everybody to eat the same thing. And so think how there's inherent meaning bound up with that, right? If you all are eating the very same food and putting it into your body and incorporating it into yourselves, that means that in a very real way, and humans have known this forever, like that is becoming you. And so you're all kind of becoming the same thing at the same time, right? And so look at all the levels here. You all were separate, doing your own things in the day, and at these special times, a sacred time, you come together and you're literally like one thing, know, around the table. Then you all put the same thing into your mouth and become, more, again, the same thing as you sit around that table. In the course of conversing, in the course of a prayer that also is a communion of thought and values, right? So there's like all these levels of communion bound up with the meal.
And like practically speaking, it's just also really nice because then I know how hungry we're all going to be for the next meal, how everyone's going to get fed. I mean, that's not what you're talking about, but it's kind of beautiful how it kind of works all together. Yeah. I can predict how to feed my kids. Yeah, just because I know exactly what we've done. We're all kind of on the same page with it, which really helps.
And see how this goes to the quality of what you're putting into you. You are saying essentially we're all making ourselves into something out of this. Let's make it the best thing.
Yeah.
The best thing prepared in the best way. And again, the best thing doesn't mean all complex and having to be like some gourmet fancy thing. Oftentimes the best things are the simplest things in life. Just a loaf of bread, a cut of meat.
Well, and then that makes
lightly seasoned.
That makes holidays and things like that much more special because then we're saving. Kind of like in our world, we're kind of eating party food almost all the time.
Yeah.
So it's really nice to have dinner. If we can teach our kids, this is how you can eat, and it can still be nice and special. Like, I guess I should have come with some examples. But then when it comes to a holiday and we're kind of really pulling out the stops and putting in a lot more effort, it sends a big message and makes it more enjoyable to celebrate.
And that goes nicely because that's an extra sacred time. This is kind of the repeating everyday sacred time. That becomes, the extra sacred time, usually bound up with some other context of meaning, like a participating in an event like the birth of Christ or somebody's birthday or something like that, right? So it all works in the same way. And so you're looking to have these nice, minor sacred experiences every day in order to also better appreciate the major ones. And the major ones, the one thing we've been realizing, and this is something the Farmstead meatsmith has told me, and that's, again, a channel I definitely recommend you check out because it is about butchery, but it's about so much more, that they kind of introduced into my mind the idea that like feasting, the very idea of feasting is a skill to prepare it. It's a lot of work to prepare a feast, and then it's a lot of work to enjoy it in the right way.
Yeah.
And then it's a lot of work to kind of come out of the feast in the right way. And it's all a skill, if you will. You have to actually kind of work at the sacredness that you're trying to create.
Yeah.
One other point that just as, kind of not gee whiz points, but related points is, think about why it's the case that a shared meal is kind of the most common thing you would ever do on a date, as you're romantically courting someone or trying to meet them for the first time. You do this same kind of ritual, right? Because you're kind of testing out what is it like when we try to make ourselves into the same thing. Does that work? Does it not? Right? So just see kind of the meaning in that.
Yeah.
And in that, let's kind of just throw in here that in this context of everything matters, the conversation does matter. So Sara had some good ideas. And in fact, you want to introduce this book?
So this is the book I was looking for last time I was on this feed. The Secrets of Happy Families. This has been a really useful source. It's not like we use everything from this, but it gives you great ideas. And it devotes a whole chapter to family meals and talks about ways to implement it, how it doesn't have to look like you think it does, how it's so simple, but it can be so significant. And one of the big things it talks about is using that time to talk about bigger, more important things, either having nights that you choose certain topics. Like it's Wednesday night, we're going to be talking about, like in this book, it talks about, that's the night we're going to tell you stories about your grandparents so that you guys understand and know them and understand especially the good and the bad things that they experience in their lives so you can do a better job in your life.
So there's something that people have been doing at meals from time immemorial to make them more enchanted is tell stories.
Yeah, and that's huge. And then they suggest things on how to incorporate small kids. They have an evening that's like they'll throw out a word and then kids have to kind of tell either a sentence or a story back about the word just to kind of keep everyone engaged and involved. Some of it's too planned for our family. Like we can't be that
we've never done anything exactly like that.
But I think if there's one thing I would want to say, if you guys aren't having family meals and you do want to start it, it's going to take like some very thoughtful effort to get things going to the point where then people are actually asking to have family meals because they've started to feel the value of it in their lives. And that might take a while and it will take some practice.
Yeah.
So
the most important thing is just to do it.
Yeah, I think that I just want to be more like encouraging that this isn't so hard. Our meals have become, it's become simple because we've gotten it into a routine. But anyway.
Yeah, no, all good points. And one other thing I'll throw in is a meal is a great context in which to read a sacred text together. You know,
Absolutely,
you're all there. You know, the nice thing about a meal is that it naturally attracts people because people get hungry, right? And so you're all there, and so it's a great setting that you've got a captive audience. Okay, let's, you know, as the meal's kind of wrapping up, pull out the sacred text, read that together. Once again, it's like you just ate, you know, good food that you're making yourself into something. Now you're eating, you know, the sacred ideas, if you will, or principles that you're also kind of nurturing yourself with. And I mean, again, there's just levels and levels of meaning and sacredness that can go into a meal. One other thing to throw in there is how, you know, I brought up in recent streams how sacrifices in pretty much all ancient temples and shrines and things like that were seen as a shared meal with the gods. They're always food. I didn't realize that the sacrifices are always food, and you're offering up that food to the gods to please them, and you're like looking to have a meal with the gods in the context of that sacrifice. So again, very cool stuff.
Well, and one other thing I wanted to add too is if you have a family with small kids or even older kids and you're trying to read sacred text or tell stories, or we try to talk about political things that might seem confusing or important or big events in the world that are going on, current events rather. Sometimes it might seem like people aren't paying attention or like really getting it, but it at least opens up the space that so many times people come back and say, wait, what was that we were talking about? Or I forgot how that story ended with grandma or something like that. And so it's just kind of like kind of opens the doors to have a lot more conversations, maybe more individually with us. Yeah. But it also says we think these stories are so important, or these events or whatever it is we're talking about, because we're taking the time here to talk about it while we're all together.
We talk so much about the importance of stories on here that sometimes I don't stress enough that your family stories may be the most important ones, in as much as stories are containers of meaning, right? And so they shape who people are and how they understand the world. And so your family stories are the most kind of more closest level of shaping who you are and who you came from and who makes you up and kind of what attributes are inside of you as to meaning, especially, that you can then, come back into life and put those things into play. So meals are such a good place to do that. I wanted to read some of your comments you guys have been making. That let's see, quick. Yeah, Martin had mentioned before that today's society kind of thinks it's more prosperous than society in medieval ages just because they have an iPhone. I think in many regards it's the opposite is true. Yeah, we have more technology, but less
of this
meaning,
kind of stuff.
less
sitting
sacredness,
down, being together, face to face.
Yep, which is all bound up with an experience of enchantment. So we're poorer in that way, even though we're richer in material wealth, right?
Yep.
Christian says, I'm really bad at sitting at the table with my wife and daughter. I sit at a desk all day and want to do anything but sit when I come home. Might need to move to standing desk at work. Yeah.
I think I want to share a little story. Maybe you're going to bring this later, but one thing that I had a friend who went to law school right before me that taught me this, that their dad got home really late from from law school, and they still wanted to kind of have a time to be together and gather and talk. So they just would pop a bowl of popcorn and sit around and have that bowl of popcorn together. And that was their sort of beginning of the ritual. And that helped them get on to keep family meals going after they were done with law school. But I think and that's one thing that you might really like in this book too, because it just brings up a few ways to make it just not hard and simple and enjoyable. I don't know.
Yeah, and taking, that's taking the principles around this and changing them to your context. Everybody has a different context, different schedules, different things going on in their lives, but you can always take the principles and figure out how to make them work for you. LSJT said, I really admire you for trying to do this. My parents always did this and never realized how important it is as a child. It's a moment of shared thought and bonding, as you say.
Yeah.
It's interesting how these kinds of things that shape the world, I think, that are far more important than what's going on in boardrooms and, the White House Situation Room and things like that. We don't realize just how significant these things are. And because we've taken out the sacredness of them, we also denigrate the people bound up with them. We see it as a chore, as housework, to prepare a meal, where hopefully we've done enough context laying to say that, like, if a woman is the person most bound up with the preparation of the meal and the presentation to her family, she's much more operating in a sacred context there. She's a priestess in that sense of a sacred ritual, right, that deserves all the respect and sacredness bound up with that. But we took that away, right? And so in doing that, then it ends up looking like, just housework, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I like to look at it more as I'm doing something, irreplaceable.
Martin was saying, first to fast, then to feast. And that's one part of feasting, is they almost always had fasts before them, which, again, that's an act of a sacred act that then only made, the feasting more meaningful, more delicious, more impactful. And so that's another thing that we're trying to learn more about. Our tradition has a tradition of fasting, but in a certain way, and a fasting is a much broader concept, in as much as you can fast from any number of things. So that's something to, hopefully we'll bring up in another discussion someday on feasting and fasting.
I like this one.
He said, I heard that in one Polynesian tribe there's only one sin, and that is to eat alone. Yeah, and that's part of the beauty of the Polynesian peoples, is they've actually brought with them, they still maintain some more of these cultural traditions that are just bound up with
family relationships and connections,
with sacredness, and so they, luckily they can all teach us something from that, right? LSJT, what I loved as a child in big family meals was watching adults discuss things. I felt safe, like I was learning from elders, and they gave me the privilege of being there and listening.
I totally see that with our kids, like especially if I'm on the phone talking to like one of my sisters or my mom or something like that. They love to listen in and ask questions, but I do think it gives a certain sense of security. I do. And especially like meals, of course.
And there's big learning brought up with it, because how often are kids just sitting there kind of having to listen to adults,
right?
And then little by little they try to start participating.
Yeah, and then they see it's kind of cool, or it kind of feels good to be able to contribute something, like at the dinner table. Now it's just not you and I talking all the time. Thomas can easily jump in, Robbie, Corinne. I mean, so many of them can now.
Exactly. Christian says, eating alone is so much worse than a shared meal. I do definitely want to introduce these rhythms more into my life, family meals, Sabbath, etc. Yeah, and good for you.
Applaud you in that, and
just, again, the most important thing is just to do little by little what you can handle, and just do things and learn as you go, rather than expecting perfection. And that book, just in case we didn't do enough, was
I can't tell what you can
see here. The Secrets of Happy Families by Bruce Feiler. So
I can't really see it very well there, can you? I don't know. Anyway, that's what it is. It's really good.
Okay, we're moving towards the end part where Sarah does have to get going, but we do have a few more minutes, so a few more things to throw in there. So we've talked this week about how sacred time oftentimes operates in cycles, and cyclical time, and so you can see how meals fall very much into that, in as much as you have the cycles. And I was thinking about, what's the significance of the fact that we do 3 meals a day? Because it's a little bit of an arbitrary fact that we do 3. And it could, some people's, I'm sure you can always find exceptions. I'm sure some people's have done 2 or a different time of the world. Maybe they had, a different kind of rhythm. But for sure in the world today, predominantly there is this notion of breakfast, lunch, dinner, 3 meals. What's the symbolism, or the meaning behind that? And I was thinking, we've been talking also this week about how, in terms of numbers, kind of numbers that are usually bound up with kind of certain symbolic principles, the number 4 is one that's so common in the world and in the way that we kind of define worlds or places. So there's the 4 cardinal directions, there's the 4 seasons of the year. Yesterday in our discussion about the 4th turning, that these periods of kind of worlds, creations of worlds and ends of worlds were divided up into 4. So in a lot of ways, we see 4. So think how 3 meals actually divides up kind of the 4 main periods of the day, if you will. And so here's another way that kind of meals come into sacred time, by being kind of the border events that introduce a new period of the day. So we have kind of before the breakfast period, and what's that like for you? I mean, what's kind of the nature of the before breakfast period?
It's like your chance to actually start the day off well. It's your kind of only chance to start the day off well, because if you sleep in or you kind of miss your alarm or something, you automatically kind of just feel a little bit more like, oh, I'm a little bit behind. But if you can wake up, get going, get things in position to start, especially as a mom, that energy will carry through the house, and it'll be a lot more productive day, I bet.
Yeah, and a lot of people will do, read a sacred text themselves before that. A lot of people exercise before breakfast. You're trying to get in kind of the first, the
things you need that special energy for too,
yeah. And I would
an open mind with.
Exactly, yeah. And I would compare this a little more to spring, right? So that's kind of the spring of the day. Then you have breakfast, and that period then from breakfast to lunch is very much like the summer of the day. It's still a period of growth where things are productive, ordering.
Homeschool needs to be done at that time, piano practicing, other preparations for the afternoon, but like that's really important time to really be getting the meat of the day done. Yeah,
exactly. And then, the noon meal kind of is that division between another, sacred number, which is the duality between kind of the light and dark part of the day, you could say. So the noon meal is when things, you have the noon meal, but then after that things start inching towards,
sun starts to set a bit,
towards death and disillusion, you could say, right? So you start getting tired more right after that noon meal, and you have to, you find some little pockets of productivity. Maybe you have some caffeinated beverage of some sort to get you back going again, to get a little bit lower, but things are already ebbing towards tiredness and disillusion.
But things can still get done, but a lot of times to get really effective work done at that time of the day, it has to be already planned out or anticipated earlier in the day.
Yeah. It takes a lot more effort, and that's kind of like the autumn or the fall of the day. And then you have dinner. And notice how dinner, if like let's say a culture, if there's any meal that's going to be more bound up with alcoholic beverages, for instance, which is all about changing your mentality, disillusion, kind of revelry, things like that, it's going to be more focused on dinner. Why? Because that's the part of the day where everything's starting to break down. There's no more. Usually, it's a lot harder to work at that point of the day. Most people are stopped working. Yeah, it's more about relaxing, renewal, letting things kind of dissolve until you reach this point where it's essentially you die for the day. That's what it is.
Sorry.
That's what sleep is, right?
Where we go to bed.
Yeah. And so you go to bed,
put the kids to bed, have some
very much like
relaxation
death,
time,
and then boom, you wake up in the morning and you're alive again. So anyway, I just wanted to throw that in to show how once you start seeing these cycles and rhythms in life, again, they become more meaningful. They help guide you. You can be like, okay, yeah, it's here before breakfast. Here's how I'm going to kind of define this space before breakfast and make it sacred, or this time before breakfast. And then you make the time after breakfast this sacred time in these different ways and whatnot. And so anyway, you get the idea. I just wanted to throw that in there, though.
Good.
Anything else we wanted to cover here? So I think we'll probably... all we had left was to make sure to reiterate, there's the ideal and then there's the reality.
Yeah.
And if you were to come to one of our meals, it's not it is not this painting yet. Our food is not where we want it to be. That's part of what we're doing here on the Farmstead.
We're working on that.
We are, our manners are not where they want to be. Our skill at preparing the food is not where we want it to be. Our conversation, it's getting better. Like, our kids are genuinely hanging around more and enjoying talking together. It's getting better, but we've had to do this thousands of times.
Yeah. I mean, if anything, right now, the best thing our meals do in that sense is it's getting everyone together and kind of getting the feel of their mood and being able to attend to that sometimes. But it's not always like this great discussion, everything like that. But then every once in a while that does happen.
Yeah.
And we're able to teach something and kids are listening and we're able to share things that are important. And that's why we keep doing this. That's why we go through this over and over and over again.
And then hopefully we're all looking, everything that we're trying to develop is moving towards, when we're grandparents and things like that. And our kids will have the skills to come together in a big family feast kind of thing, less often, only maybe a few times a year or whatnot, where all these skills that we built up into the family culture get brought back into the way that kind of communal experience is experienced. One other thing that I forgot to mention before that's kind of a key thing that I think a lot of parents get so wrong today, we could do a whole episode on this, but is the nature of their kids and the eating.
I think you mentioned that too, I forgot.
One principle is that how many parents today are letting their kids get away with not having to eat the same things as everybody else.
Yeah, like a different meal. 7 still eaters.
Yeah, and you see how that takes away a big chunk of the meaning of the meal. If you're giving them their dino nuggets while everybody else is eating,
the meal that was prepared, and then everyone's requesting different things,
and so
and you're like a waiter instead of just having a meal together.
Yeah. So here's our, we could do a whole episode on getting kids to eat, because it is one thing we've kind of.
It's a big thing you have to figure out.
And we've done pretty well on. I mean, our kids. Our kids are good eaters. Like, they eat all this stuff
and put effort into it.
But the basic principle is, you say, fine, you don't have to eat, but I'm not giving you anything else.
Yeah.
And guess what? It literally only takes one time doing that, one meal.
Well, you have to be consistent.
Then they realize,
you cannot hold any. Like, for us, you can't be like, oh, it was kind of a bad meal. I won't.
No matter how much they complain or whatever, you just say, no, you don't have to eat it. That's fine. That's fine. But I'm not giving you anything else. Right, and also, if they only eat the one good thing they like, they don't get anything else, until they've eaten the rest. Well, then if they don't eat anything, which is bound to happen at some point with every kid, all they have to do is go through one of those the next few hours without having a full stomach, and guess what? Whatever is served at that next meal, they will eat it. Hunger wins out. And there's
a lot of different things that can go into making sure that will happen, but.
Yeah, and then once they've eaten something a few times, lo and behold, they come to like it. It takes a little bit of appreciating something, but that's the way it works, And so there in a nutshell is how you get them to eat that, and it's important that you do and not let them get away with it. In fact, even at restaurants, we order for our kids. We don't say it as like this thing of, you just get whatever you want. Of course, we'll listen to them if they have some preference, but we order for our kids. We oftentimes share dishes, things like that. Absolutely. Because it's all about context of meaning rather than a thing of I'm just getting, my personal fulfillment out of this, junk food or this and that, because there's a lot of dishes we just won't buy for our kids.
We also make sure that the younger kids are dished up so that people are getting reasonable amounts of food to eat, because that's a big deal with kids, the size and how it can seem overwhelming or just seem gross because there's too much food in front of them or not enough. Anyway.
So already, we're
all
getting
that kind
into
of stuff goes into it.
The other episode that we could make on this. But anyway, so I think that wraps up what we wanted to say about this.
I hope so. I still feel like we get to the end of these things. I'm like, there's so many other things I could have said, but I hope that the basic idea of just kind of having the time be more than just having food, bringing people together, is what rubs off on people the most. Yeah.
And the main principle, inasmuch as you put effort into this and start making these moments more sacred, the space of it and the time of it, your life gets better, right? Is more full of the kind of meaning that so many people seem to be lacking in today's world. So with that, I think I need to let Sara.
I do need to go, but I just wanted to say, because it started the whole veganism thing, that sometimes I'm really afraid to come on here because my talent isn't in words like speaking. And so sometimes I don't know exactly what to say, and I might say things kind of wrong. So I'm glad you brought that up, because I do want you to know I actually do think about how it works with raising animals. and things like that. And when I mean like I don't know what it's going to feel like, but I know enough.
So you're talking to LSJT and
LSJT and what was happening there. I know enough of
which we're going to talk about a little bit more.
Yeah, I know enough of what. I guess I just wanted to make sure that I came off that I know enough